All right, good evening again, I guess. Um, how many of y'all tonight have some neighbors? Okay, y'all have neighbors? All right. So, do y'all know your neighbors? Now, I'm just asking some questions, kind of get our minds thinking a little bit. I got a lot of questions tonight, and I would like help with some answers. So, tonight I'd like to think a little bit about our neighbors. And another thing, too, I should make two things clear. Number one is it isn't like I have outreach in mind and like y'all might be getting some new neighbors, if some of you move. Like I don't have that in mind at all. Another thing is, too, is I'm not trying to pick on Harold. I don't see him right now. There he is. That didn't inspire this either. So, to get our minds thinking a little bit, I got a couple stories I want to tell you. And this is personal stories. I'd rather if y'all would share your stories, but I know my story better. And I almost didn't share these because it's really humiliating. But it did have a bearing on sharing about this tonight. So, back whenever, I don't know, it's probably been 10 years ago now, really, but I lived in Indiana there, and me and my dad and my brother, we worked together on a business. And so we naturally had some neighbors. They weren't as close to the house, as they are here, as, they might have been a mile away or something, this particular one. And we had this neighbor guy. He was, let's see, how should I say it? He was one of those guys that seemed to be the party guy of the neighborhood. And he never created any trouble for us, but he's one of those individuals that you just kind of, you wonder what he'd be up to next, And so we never, I guess, really reached out to him. We never stopped by, made friends or anything. That was a bad thing on our part. So go on a year or two, and one day we were on a job we had going, and we hired in these guys to do a part of the job. And so these guys show up. They're going to show up, at like 3 in the afternoon or something to start. So we're there, and what do you know? It's this guy rolls in. And he worked for the company that we hired in to do that job. And it's like, oh boy, because we like to talk to the guys we're working with. And he comes over there and he's like, hey, y'all live, such a house up the road from me, don't you? And we're like, yeah. He's like, man, he said, you guys know how to have a good time, don't you? I was like, whoa. We were just young boys, I guess. And we didn't try to create any trouble in the neighborhood, but we definitely, we probably weren't the quietest. And, I was like, and I've thought about that different times through the years. That was is that really how we should be remembered in the neighborhood, or like what guys think of and how they think of us, neighbors think of us? Next story I want to share is a little different. So we got married and we live where we do now. This one's a little harder to tell because Harold's back there and probably hiding a laugh, but we lived there, I don't know, a couple years probably. Had these neighbors across the street. The guy was a military guy, so he was at that point going a lot of the time. He'd be around some weekends. And I thought different times that we should go over and say hi, But then we wouldn't get it done, and which was our fault. And we were on a trip to Idaho, I think, or somewhere. And of course, of all things, we have to get this call that our dog back at the house is making trouble, And so we knew there was potential for that, I guess, being as we had a critter back there. But this dog had gone over to his house, and he had this big stately, I don't know, Great Dane or something. They're like a miniature pony dog, And they were fighting. So we didn't hear this from the neighbor, another neighbor, I guess. And so we're trying to decide what to do, like how you take care of that long distance and stuff. And so it ended up, there was some stuff happened, and it got kind of intense, I guess. And so I was like, well, we're just going to fix it up once we get back, So we got home, and I think it's the night we got home, and I'm like, I really should probably go over to this dude and just, I never met him before, so that made it difficult. I'm like, why didn't I go meet him like 2 years ago, make a relationship. But I was like, I still got to go over there and make sure his dog's doing all right. So I go over there and I knock on the door. I said, hey, I'm the guy who lives across the road, Heard my dog was beating up on your dog a little bit. And I said, like, is your dog injured? Like, is there anything I can do to help? He's like, well, he said he had some wounds, but, put some salve on and stuff, and he thinks he'll be all right. And he thanked me for coming over and stuff. And I was like, man, you better take my phone number just in case, anything turns up. So he said, yeah, he'll take my phone number. So it went a week, and I was still a little worried about this. I was like, this could really turn out bad. But I was like, hey, we'll just have to do, try to make it right or whatever. And about a week later, I was out in the driveway, didn't wash my truck or something, and this dude comes flying up the road, wheels up in our driveway, and I'm like, okay, this could be interesting. I was expecting bad, you know what I mean? Like maybe his dog died. I had no idea, He gets out of his truck, comes walking over there, and this guy's about crying. I'm like, okay, yeah, this is probably really bad, I'm just kind of expecting the worst. He's like, Steve, is your dog all right? And I'm like, so as y'all probably know, we don't have a dog in the house. We kind of treat it as an outdoors dog, And I'm like, yeah, I said, as far as I didn't notice anything was wrong. He's like, well, he said, I didn't feel right. He said, honestly, you told me about your dog getting into my dog and want to make that right. And I'll have to be honest that after your dog got into my dog bit your dog. Hopefully that wasn't too confusing. I was like, oh, okay. I was like, well, I appreciate you letting me know. But I said, I think it's all good. This guy is still about crying, like he wished he would have told me the other night and stuff. And so is that how we're supposed to live with our neighbors? Fast forward a couple years, I guess. This guy is really good friends with us. I mean, he texts me, he sees me on the road, or I see him or something, and he likes to see how my day's going or whatever. So is that the way that we should make neighbors? So those are some things to get our minds thinking. I would like to read a few verses. I'd like to go to Luke 10 and read verses 27 to 37. All right, Luke 10. I might actually start at verse 25 there. And behold, a certain lawyer stood up and tempted him, saying, Master, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? He said unto him, What is written in the law? How readest thou? And he answering said, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy strength, with all thy mind, and thy neighbor as thyself. And he said unto him, Thou hast answered right, this do, and thou shalt live. But he, willing to justify himself, said unto Jesus, And who is my neighbor? And Jesus answering said, A certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and fell among thieves, which stripped him of his raiment, and wounded him, and departed, leaving him half dead. And by chance there came down a certain priest that way, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side, and likewise a Levite. When he was at the place, came and looked on him, and passed by on the other side. But a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion on him, and went to him, and bound up his wounds, pouring in oil and wine, and set him on his own beast, and brought him to an inn, and took care of him. And on the morrow, when he departed, he took out 2 pence, and gave them to the host, and said unto him, Take care of him, and whatsoever thou spendest more, when I come again, I'll repay thee. Which now of these 3 thinkest thou was neighbor unto him that fell among the thieves? And he said, He that showed mercy on him. Then said Jesus unto him, Go and do thou likewise. All right, so first of all this evening, I'd like to know y'all's thoughts. Who is our neighbors in today's life? Is it the people that these folks in the front row? Are they close enough to be neighbors, or can I be neighbors of the folks in the back as well?
I think here it'd be referring to anyone that you bump shoulders with.
Okay.
Samaria was distinct from Judea geographically, religiously, socially, probably a few other ways you could come up with. They normally had as little contact with each other as possible.
All right. I think that adds a interesting dimension to it. And I would like to, I read this passage kind of because of, kind of a basis in the Bible, where it talks about a neighbor, but I don't want to limit it to this, discuss this passage. I want to think in our lives today, if that makes sense.
I believe those that we come in contact with, kind of interesting, the same fellow you were talking about, I had an encounter with him just about last week here. I wasn't the person that did the area, but I came home and right away he comes across his drive, drives us, right across from each other. He comes over I didn't know what he wanted. It's well, I'm guessing he was probably coming over to fix up my drive because he drove down a semi. When he turned his wheels, it tore the asphalt stuff up, and he felt bad about this. And I was like, you don't have to worry about that. But sometimes people, we might think they don't care about things in life. Their conscience also works. I mean, it's not that it was that bad, but it's just he probably realized I'm going to see this. However, in the past, it's been worse than that. They went into the yard, but I didn't go over and tell them. I mean, it was a deep rut, but I took care of it. It's not we can't hold grudges and then still have good communication with our neighbors. That same individual, if I'm on the other side, he'll actually say my name or say hi. It's he maybe has raised his voice, but how do we relate to other people? People can hear or know if we care about them or not.
So that kind of brings up another thing I was thinking about. Is it our job to make the first move? I'm talking building a relationship or whatever.
Well, how did you do when you're dating your wife? Who made the first move? You don't have to tell me. If you want to build a relationship, you're probably going to make a step in that direction, okay? Like I said, you don't have to answer that question.
So back to thinking about who is our neighbor, thinking about the same building a relationship with our neighbors. I'd like to talk about that a little bit later, how much of a relationship, but how do we know how far to take that? Should we just go to the folks in our, city square, or do we go drive 2 miles, or does that not even matter?
I think being a neighbor is almost more of or can be, should be, more of a lifestyle. Doesn't matter whether it's actually your neighbor at home or whether you're just walking through the store and you strike up a conversation with someone, or whatever the case is, just being that friendly, neighborly type, whether you know the person or not, you know where they're from or not, doesn't matter, distance.
Dealing with neighbors in the sense of next door neighbors, sometimes it's not always what we do, it's also sometimes what we don't do. And by that, I mean, if my neighbor irritates me, I don't go give him a piece of my mind. Sometimes I remind myself, well, I'm sure I do things sometimes that irritate my neighbors, so if I'm irritated at them, maybe it's a good time not to say anything. That's something I've found helpful in neighbor relationships. And that depends how close they are, if you're related, all those things, all those variables fit into that.
Yeah, I like that point. It definitely makes a difference if we have like Amish or Mennonite neighbors versus like, you know, if we have just community folks or whatever. I like that point though, that you said you don't always give them a piece of your mind, because like Harold said, usually they know that you would have reason to. Like there's times that maybe somebody automatically offends you, they probably shouldn't, as far as like maybe you shouldn't be that, whatever, but people usually know if they can expect, like, or at least be looking for somebody, seems like.
One case in point about down that line, this happened just last week, since she has personal experience. So, as most of you know, I work with glass workers for a living. Usually carry 2 wheelbarrows on our forming trailer. And I came out there and put my wheelbarrows with her. That's Pete. Did you take that wheelbarrow? Well, in my mind that far out that I just lost the wheelbarrow, I'll never do it. I couldn't figure out what happened with it. Well, I didn't really need it, so I just didn't do anything about it. I thought, well, I'm going to have to replace that wheelbarrow at some point. A couple of weeks went by, and near Saturday I was out in the shop, and there comes one of Amish neighbors with a wheelbarrow behind his car that had set in the drive and left. Never said anything to anybody. Okay, that's where my wheelbarrow was at. So I didn't say anything. Still debating maybe I shouldn't say something once I can do it in a nice way. For the time being, I let it ride.
Didn't know if you needed an extra one for a day or two, or.
They had come asking about borrowing some tools for some project, and I wasn't at home. Well, they didn't really have permission, but they listened to themselves.
I think the right thing to do is to go buy him a wheelbarrow.
Better call.
I have to admit, I was a little perturbed.
Yeah, it was a little hard whenever somebody views your place as a shopping store, you know, or a rental place, whenever it's not really, but.
Did you ever wonder what your close neighbors of your home, what they think that they never say? You see, the neighbors that are close are the ones that observe your life day after day, and for us, it's 25 years. I'm not sure what they think exactly, but does my life align up with what I say and what I preach or whatever, you know? Or is they coming up with a different conclusion after all these years? So we want to think about neighbors in that way. The close neighbors we live around are the ones that observe us. If it's the people in the store that we bump shoulders with, we need to have that neighborly attitude, but they're not the ones observing us day in and day out on our, in our good days and our bad days. Like how we leave the driveway.
You're saying going to work, or? That may have been our downfall, test driving too many vehicles or something after working on them. I like that point. So how does God expect us to, how should I say, we're human. So like, and we want to live as close to God as possible, but like there are those days where you fail. Like, and I'm thinking back to the first story I shared. If you failed, what's the best way to like regain that neighbor's, like that could take years. Like, are you just over? Like you mess up one day, or are you just over with, inspiring that guy, or?
Yes, we're human. God doesn't, if we mess up one time, God doesn't say, "Okay, you're done." He gives us another chance. And it might not just be our next door neighbor, but even in church. If we mess up one time with a friend, are we going to forgive each other and try again? Or are we just going to say, "Okay, we messed up, we're done now"?
I think that's a good point. I like that point. You said that God, obviously forgave us so many times as well. So should we go like to the neighbor guy and say, look, I have been maybe being a little noisy in the neighborhood or something, like, sorry for that. Like, would that be the thing to do? Or do we just kind of suppose that kind of gradually living a little bit different, a little more settled down or whatever, like that's kind of going to do the trick? Maybe that's too hard of questions. Maybe that's stuff you never thought about.
Right, depends a little bit on the offense. Some offense, you have to apologize. If he sees that you truly are sorry for what you did and actually do make a change, I think that'll go both ways.
All right, I like that thought. So the next thing I was thinking about is, so if we build a relationship with our neighbors, how close is it okay to be with your neighbors? Like, do you follow that? And then once again, it kind of is different if you have Amish or Mennonite neighbors, whatever, folks you go to church with. I'm talking like community folks, like talking that military guy, like, is it okay for me to go out for supper if he wants to do that, or?
I think most likely so, we gotta be watching what we drink. I don't know if you're gonna pass whatever for judging that, but by the smell, you need to be careful what you associate with. If you just eat a regular meal, I don't see no problem with that.
I think Jesus would.
I'd probably keep the coffee off, anything that's questionable. Tea would work good.
What about if the only tea they had was a suspicious tea, though? I get your point.
How willing would you be to be known as a friend of publicans and sinners?
I was blessed to grow up in a neighborhood, we had no conservatism at all. Until about early 2000, we had a Holden move in, or mid-2000s. And I was like, our community neighbors, we do a lot together. Go back and forth, stop in and chat. They'd help us, we'll help them. Go out for supper together. And I don't know, 5, 6 years ago, we had a neighbor ask to take him out for supper with his wife. I said, I want to have a word of prayer before we pray, before we eat. And he told me later, he said, I've never heard a word.
Really?
About a year later, he told me, he said, well, me and my wife have been praying about something. I said, praise the Lord. And we're very good friends, very, very good friends. I think back to your point there on the thing of relationships, if it's our first drive, I don't think it always has to be us to go do it first, but I think we're always pursuing it. And the next step is if they come to you or you come to them, keep doing your part, because they want people. It's amazing, just on my road, of all the people we've known for years, the little people that care about them. And if you let them down again, you've missed your point. I don't think you have to do that every day for lunch, but just, do your part, because that's what they're seeking for.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I like that thing you said about how the guy had never heard a prayer before. Like, to us, that's just like, we can't imagine that. You know what I mean? And I think for myself, and this is one of the reasons I actually, I guess, studied into this a little bit or gave it more thought, was I tend to be the type of guy that, like, I get up in the morning, go to work, come home, if there's any time left in the day, do a little bit with family, go to sleep, next day it's all over, you know? And I'm sure you all do a lot better than that in these areas, but for me, I overlook so many of those people that, like, I just take for granted, you know? They've had Bible stories ever since they were, you know, just like me. So how do we get like a desire to or view people with that perspective, like that they don't have this, you know? And once again, I'm talking like where we live today, like your current address. And maybe you've reached all your neighbors. Like, I don't know everybody, so I'm not saying this like judgmentally. I'm talking like to myself, but like, how do you get like a desire to go out and or view it as important, I guess I should say.
I think one part is making time for it, because if you don't have time for it, it's going to be a nuisance for you too. I think the key is to see opportunities. Opportunities to serve is kind of the general, but yeah.
I like that thought. Maybe schedule our lives a little less busy or something, maybe. Might not be a bad idea.
One of the problems I have with our neighborhood is I can't tell these Amish apart. I told them, I can't tell you, just like a farmer with Holstein cows, and how do you tell them apart? I would just blunt, you know, it's like, when he meant something, when he goes past, mention his name so I know who he is. But now with all the e-bikes and everything else, everything they wear, I can't tell who's who, you know? But you're still out of the way, they still know if you recognize them as they're going past from that aspect. And they're friendly. I mean, how much time does it take to raise your hand? Or do you look the other way and you didn't hear the bike go? I know one of the other neighbors we have, you're allowed to talk to him too, but he wants your time. And there's times I have some other things to do, but he's probably lonely, but he wants to talk. And there's a point in time, like I need to get going, you know, after a while. Which is more important? your time or God's time? After all, whose time is it?
Yeah, I really like that point as well. Like you said, do you have time to wave? Like, that's the simplest thing you can do. Like, it's pretty complicated to get on the well, sorry, Bert maybe, but to me, it's pretty complicated to get on the airplane and go on over the seas, and visit everybody over there. Like, am I actually like fully, like you said, give a hand wave, smile at somebody? Am I filling my spot where I'm at currently, to its max potential or whatever?
Something else that relates to several of these areas is to be observant and to try to get to know your neighbors. If you have long-term contact with them, not always face-to-face conversation, but that is obviously a good way to get to know them. To just be observant and see what their routines are, what kinds of things they seem to like doing, and so on. And I find I have to keep in mind that do unto others as you would have them do unto you doesn't mean a wooden, okay, here's the things I like, so that I'll accommodate that for my neighbors. Well, maybe they don't like exactly the same set of things that I do, and so on. Another thing would be, one of our neighbors is very focused on what he's doing. And so, yeah, I can try to wave, but I'm not sure most of the time he even realizes that I wave. So, it's not maybe the most useful way to try to be neighborly to that individual. But maybe something else would be much better. A couple of times he had an issue with something, and I took care of it as soon as I possibly could. And he mentioned later on that he appreciated that.
I think something else that can be helpful is to pray for your neighbors. It'll help you have the concern for them, or a desire to reach them.
Yeah, I really like that thought, because if we aren't praying for them, how are we gonna be, awake for those opportunities when they do come? All right, well, I really appreciate the discussion. Another thing I thought of in closing, I had a guy telling me that, there's times in dealing with our neighbors, maybe we put a word in for the Lord here and there, and we want to see some fruit. Keith said they lived there 25 years or whatever. I think especially if you have like long-term neighbors, we want to see some action, want to see some results, of our good deeds or whatever. But if we let that drive us, I think we're doing it for the wrong reason. And number two, if we just do those little kind deeds here and there, when that neighbor hits a tough spot in life, he knows where to come to. Even if he, if we don't think he's been noticing or whatever, people do know where they can go for help and a solid friend, when they run into the tough times in life. All right, I think that's all I have.